Welcome to Climate Connect Nigeria podcast, where we explore the intersection of climate change and community resilience. Today, we are talking about flooding and local approaches to escape flood when they happen. From Lagos to Lokoja, from Abuja to Anambra, from Benue to Adamawa, from Delta State to Bayelsa State, we have stories of flooding, and we have those things wreaking havoc on our communities, displacing families, and disrupting livelihood. But are there stories of resilience we need to tell? Are there innovative solutions local people need to adapt to live with flood and to prepare for flood? Are there traditional knowledge we need to pass on to people? Are there creative approaches to stay safe? Today, I am joined by Ambassador Richard Nyamkume, the president and founder of Ambassadors of Dialogue, Climate Change and Reintegration, a development-focused organization with strong presence in the Bay State, the Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe State of northern Nigeria. And he's here so we can talk about those innovative solutions. So join me as I welcome Ambassador Richard to the Climate Connect Nigeria podcast. Welcome to Climate Connect Nigeria.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so talk to us about what you do at DCR Ambassadors and your role there.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Ambassador Richard Nyamkume. I am the president and founder of Ambassadors of Dialogue, Climate and Reintegration. It's a national civil society organization. We work to protect ecosystems, species, and also promote earth stewardship. We also do a lot of other activities, cutting across promoting dialogue, peace-building dialogues, and other forms of environmental conservation and species preservation, including the reintegration of displaced persons. It could be border migrants or internally displaced persons, or all forms of people that have been displaced from their original communities. So that's what we do as an organization.
Okay. You're welcome to Climate Connect Nigeria podcast. Here we talk about climate change, and I'm happy that your organization also work around climate change and other ways of securing the earth. So today, like I said, we are talking about flood, and we are exploring innovations that our local communities can actually use to escape flood when they happen. So first of all, can you talk to us about flooding and how bad it has affected our communities?
All right, thank you so much. Flooding, as we already know, is usually refers to a situation where there is an overflow of water, either from water bodies onto dry lands, or a situation whereby the water present on dry land is unable to be absorbed by the dry land, and so it causes or wreaks havoc on the environment. Yeah, so that's generally the definition of flood. And there are various types of flood or flooding. We have flooding that occur around the riverine areas. We call them river flooding, when excess water, flows within the banks of the river, and it could happen as a result of excessive rainfall, and it will have adverse effect on the surrounding lowlands around the riverside. We also have flash flooding, the types that occur suddenly when maybe there is heavy downpour within a short period, such that the dry lands cannot absorb. We call it flash flood. We also have coastal flooding. That one happens generally around the coastal areas relating to maybe seas, oceans, and in history you've heard of situations whereby countries around coastal regions, like the one that happened around Sri Lanka many years ago, in India and many other countries, are flooded. We have urban flooding, which occurs in urban cities, maybe due to poor drainage systems, or maybe blockage in drainage systems, and all of that. We have pluvial flooding and many other kinds of floods. Yeah, so basically, when flood occurs in an area, it causes damages to human property, it threatens lives. A lot of people have died as a result of being hit by flood, maybe when they cannot swim out of flooded areas. And so it causes damage to property, it wreaks havoc on human lives. It also causes contamination of groundwater, because most times when an area is flooded, there's a likelihood that water will flow through maybe septic tanks or soakaway, and then bring out those contaminated feces or waste into fresh water bodies. And so these are some of the areas that flood really hits. It also causes damage to infrastructure like roads and buildings, and also brings out a very high cost of recovery for governments.
Yeah, okay. You just mentioned about infrastructure. Some people doubt and they believe that flooding in Nigeria is not majorly as a result of climate change. Some assume that it is because of infrastructural deficiencies. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, well, flooding is a multifaceted concept. The causes of flooding cannot be traced to just one aspect. First of all, there is a likelihood that 90% of scientists have reached a consensus agreement that climate change is driving environmental hazards such as flood, and this is traced back to the melting Arctic ice around the Arctic Sea, and the melting ice, when it comes into the river bodies or into the oceans or seas, it increases the volume of water, and this flows down to other parts and then into countries, into nations, states, and local water bodies, which increases the volume of water in those water bodies. So when that happens, definitely there is a tendency that the water will overflow onto lowlands and wreak havoc on people. So climate change is on one hand responsible remotely for flood because of the erratic rainfalls or rain patterns that we experience in present day. Then on the other hand, also our urban structures could also be responsible. For instance, when a community has poor drainage systems, there is a likelihood that when it rains, water will not be able to travel through those drainage routes, and so it has to overflow onto the land. So while on one hand, climate change is responsible for flooding, on the other hand is our human behavior, our waste disposal practices, our urban designs, and all of that. So there are a lot of contributory factors to why we're having more frequent flood now than ever.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to areas where we need to do as people to prevent flooding, just like you've mentioned. But while we talk about that, I'd like us to also mention some of the things state actors and non-state actors have done in trying to combat flooding in Nigeria, because we've seen that Nigeria is one of Africa's countries that is really hit with climate disaster. So flooding, as one of the extreme weather events, is really affecting people. When you go to places like the recent one in Lagos State that packed people's house, destroyed life, destroyed properties. We had one of the worst one in Kogi, Lokoja last year, and we have a lot of stories around the country. You go to places like Bayelsa State, all around the year, there's flood in that region of the country. So we see all of this happening, but then people are now thinking, what are the state actors doing and what are the non-state actors like you doing, and how can they improve on their work?
All right, so thank you so much. I think state actors have actually been working very assiduously, to be able to solve or mitigate the flood challenge. I'm aware that government, through its emergency management agencies, have been able to set up early warning systems. For instance, periodically you hear NIMET giving early warning, signals to people about flood and identifying places that will possibly experience flash flood. And so that's the early warning structure is there. It has always been there, and people are always warned. Most times, if you look back, you see that the places that have ever been flooded, NIMET perhaps at some point had told people that between so period you should be anticipating flood. So it gives people a lot of time to be able to relocate. Unfortunately, most times it's difficult for people to relocate, and then the flood comes to meet them. So there are presence of early warning systems, run by government agencies, and it's actually very, very effective because they do their surveys and then report on the weather conditions and alert people. Apart from that, governments are also doing a lot of things to be able to build up drainage systems. I know that there are ecological funds that government assess to be able to construct good drainage systems for their communities, so that urban communities will not be flooded. There are also a lot of activities going on in terms of behavioral change communication.